If you really want to understand how the world works, don't look at politics, don't look at elections, and don't listen to the speeches they put on television. Look at money. Not the money in your pocket, but who creates it, who controls its supply, and who benefits when it loses value. That's where real power lives. People are taught that money was created to make trade easier. One man had grain, another had meat, and society needed a medium of exchange. It sounds reasonable, but it's not how history actually played out. For most of human history, money was never invented by the people. It was imposed from the top down, by kings, by emperors, by governments, and later by financial powers standing behind governments. Money wasn't created for convenience. It was created to collect taxes, to pay armies, and to maintain control. From the very beginning, money was a political weapon long before it became an economic tool. In the early days, money was tied to something real: gold, silver, precious metals. Its value came from the material itself, but a problem emerged very quickly. Who held the gold? Not the people. Power always controlled the vaults, and once you hold everyone's gold, you discover a dangerous truth. No one actually checks whether it's all there. They just need to believe it is. From that moment on, money began to separate from real value and attach itself to something stronger than gold: forced trust. Banks didn't start as financial empires. They were simple gold custodians. People deposited gold and received paper receipts. At first, those papers only proved ownership. Over time, they began circulating directly as money. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Not everyone comes to withdraw their gold at the same time. In that moment, banks realized they could issue more paper than the gold they actually held. That's when money began to be created out of nothing. No mining, no production, just numbers written into a ledger. That was the birth of monetary power. Once money is created as debt, interest becomes inevitable. And here's the fatal flaw. The principal is created, the interest is not. That means the system is permanently short of money. Someone always has to fail. When borrowers can't pay, assets are seized. And who ends up owning those assets? The lenders. This wasn't an accident. It was designed this way. Interest isn't just the price of money. It's a machine that transfers wealth from the many to the few, legally, quietly, and continuously. At first, individuals borrowed, then merchants, then corporations, eventually governments. Wars cost money, social programs cost money, governments cost money. When taxes aren't enough, governments borrow. And they don't borrow from their citizens, they borrow from the financial system. The moment a government depends on debt, its sovereignty begins to erode, because whoever controls the flow of money controls policy. You can have a flag, an anthem, and a constitution, but if your budget depends on debt, you don't truly run your own country. People believe parliaments hold the highest power, that laws shape society, but laws mean nothing without money to enforce them. Armies need salaries, police need funding, systems need capital. The ones who control the money decide what actually happens. History's most effective coups weren't carried out with guns, they were executed through finance. You don't need to overthrow a government, you just shut off its funding. People hate taxes. Taxes cause outrage, but there's one tax that requires no vote, no announcement, no explanation: inflation. When the money supply expands, purchasing power shrinks. You lose wealth every day, but you don't know who took it. Inflation is how financial power pays for wars, crises, and policy failures without asking anyone's permission. It's the most sophisticated tax ever invented. One of the biggest lies of the modern world is that money is neutral. There is no such thing as neutral money. Money always serves its creator first. Those who receive it early get richer. Those who receive it last pay the price through inflation. That's why the rich keep getting richer while wage earners fall behind. Not because they're lazy, because of how money enters the system. Once you understand money, you understand why wars never stop. Wars aren't just about land or religion or ideology. Wars need money, and money feeds on war. War justifies debt, crisis justifies money printing, and in the chaos, assets are redistributed. Those who prepared buy cheap. Those who don't understand what's happening lose everything. If you've listened this far, keep one question in your mind. If money is power, why aren't the people who create it held accountable like governments? That question leads us deeper, to where monetary power hides behind complex structures and names the public rarely sees. Once money is separated from real value, and the power to create it no longer belongs to society, a larger question emerges. Who stands between money and power? Who can remain invisible while controlling the entire system? The answer is not governments. It is not armies. It lies in the middle layer, where money is created, distributed, and withdrawn. That is where banks move beyond service providers and become the operators of the game. Banks don't need force to rule. They control the economy's breathing. When money is cheap, they flood the system, stimulate growth, and create the illusion of prosperity. When money becomes expensive, they tighten credit, choke liquidity, and watch businesses collapse and assets get sold off. The public sees economic cycles. Insiders see execution. From that moment on, the economy no longer runs naturally. It runs on credit cycles. And those cycles are not random. They are adjusted through interest rates, lending limits, and decisions most of society never gets to participate in. Interest rates become the master dial. Turn it slightly, money slows. Turn it the other way, bubbles form. People see outcomes. They never see the hand turning the dial. When growth happens, they credit policy. When collapse comes, they call it an accident. In finance, accidents are rare. As debt expands, society gets locked into the future. You're not just working for today, you're working to pay for decisions made long before you understood the game. Debt turns time into an asset. Whoever controls debt controls the future. That's why sovereign debt becomes a strategic weapon. A nation doesn't need to be invaded to lose independence. It only needs to be pulled into a borrowing spiral. First to develop, then to sustain, finally to survive. When most of a national budget goes to servicing interest, political decisions are no longer free. There are no real choices left, only less painful options. In this system, banks don't issue commands, they set conditions. Conditions for loans, conditions for refinancing, conditions for bailouts. And every condition comes with a concession. Bit by bit, power shifts without any announcement. The public rarely notices because the process is slow. There's no single day of collapse, no official moment of loss, just living standards eroding, taxes rising, opportunities shrinking. And when people look back, they can't explain why they work harder yet feel poorer. Part of monetary power lies in complexity. The system is designed to be just confusing enough that ordinary people can't track it. Financial jargon, derivatives, credit instruments all act as a curtain. Behind that curtain, the most important decisions are made without public consent. Complexity isn't accidental, it's protection. When people don't understand, they don't resist. When they don't resist, the system continues. And by the time they realize what happened, everything has already been signed. The media talks about growth, markets, and indexes. They rarely talk about the power structure underneath, because monetary power dislikes light. It works best in darkness, where everything is framed as technical necessity, not moral choice. When a crisis hits, society is told it was unavoidable. But every crisis has beneficiaries. Assets don't disappear, they change hands. In every collapse, those holding cash buy cheap, and cash always concentrates in the same places before a crisis. People sell out of fear. The system buys because it prepared. That's the difference between players and pieces. Pieces react, players anticipate, and the system's architects are always one move ahead. When governments face crisis, they return to the only place that can save them, the financial system. In exchange, they surrender more authority, more control, more dependence. Every bailout comes with a price paid by future generations. People often ask why major financial failures are rarely punished. The answer is simple. The system doesn't see them as failures, they're operating costs. When profits are privatized and losses are socialized, risk stops being a constraint. And without real risk, behavior repeats, bubble after bubble, crisis after crisis, each larger than the last, each more destructive, yet the power structure remains intact. The most dangerous condition isn't poverty, it's not knowing why you're poor. When people believe everything comes down to personal effort, they stop questioning the system. And when they stop questioning, the system never needs to change. Money doesn't just shape economies, it shapes thought. It defines what is considered reasonable and what is labeled extreme. Questions about who creates money are often dismissed as unrealistic or dangerous, not because they're wrong, but because they threaten the foundation. When a society accepts that money must be created through debt, it also accepts scarcity as normal, relentless competition as inevitable, inequality as natural. But these aren't natural laws, they are design outcomes. In this world, freedom isn't taken by force, it's eroded by financial obligation. You voluntarily work more to service debt. You voluntarily accept risk to survive, and you call it choice. Look deeper and you'll see that monetary power doesn't need visibility. It doesn't need elections. It doesn't need speeches. It only needs to ensure there are no alternatives outside the system. And when there are no alternatives, compliance becomes invisible. All of this leads to one central point. When monetary power grows large enough, it no longer needs to control individuals. It only needs to control the rules. And once the rules are set, everyone plays whether they want to or not. In the next part, we go deeper, to where monetary power doesn't just influence economies, but shapes history, war, and global order, where money stops being a tool and becomes a weapon. When you step back and look at the entire picture from above, one truth becomes hard to ignore. Monetary power doesn't operate through brute force. It operates through structure. And once that structure is built deep enough, no one needs to give orders anymore. Society moves automatically along a path that was designed long ago. At the deepest level, power is no longer about who has more money. It's about who defines what money is. When money is defined as something that can only exist through debt, the entire society becomes locked into a single logic. To survive, you must borrow. To grow, you must borrow more. And when borrowing is no longer possible, the system quietly eliminates the weakest players. At that point, money stops being a tool. It becomes the rules of the game. And rules don't ask for permission. You either follow them or you're removed from the board. Monetary power is strongest when it's invisible, when no one can clearly point to it, when people believe this is simply how the world works, not a set of choices made by human beings. Once you accept there are no alternatives, you stop trying to change anything. You focus on adapting. This system doesn't require majority approval. It only requires silence. And silence is purchased with temporary stability. As long as money keeps flowing and daily life continues, the deeper questions are postponed. People stay busy living, busy paying debts, busy chasing short-term goals, with no energy left to examine long-term structures. When major disruptions occur, society doesn't question the foundation. It searches for fast solutions, bailouts, stimulus, more money printing. And each time this happens, the system gains another layer of reinforcement, like repairing a dam by increasing pressure behind it. Dangerous, but not an immediate collapse. And so people continue believing the method works. On the global level, monetary power doesn't need armies to dominate. It rules through standards. Monetary standards, financial standards, credit standards. Any nation that refuses to comply is quietly cut off from trade, investment, and liquidity. No public sanctions required, just a change in access conditions. That's why many countries appear independent on paper, yet remain tightly bound by invisible constraints. They can hold elections, they can change leaders, but they can't change financial direction without paying an immediate price. When money becomes the world's common language, whoever controls that language controls the conversation. The most important decisions are never made in public forums, but behind closed doors, where risk is calculated with models, not social consequences. And because everything is framed as technical necessity, as unavoidable, responsibility gets diluted. No one is ultimately accountable. Everyone is just doing their job inside the system. But the system itself has no ethics. It only optimizes for its own survival. At this stage, monetary power doesn't need to suppress free speech. It only needs to redirect attention. Media focuses on surface-level conflicts. Politics divides society into opposing camps. Meanwhile, the core structure remains untouched. People fight over outcomes, while the rules of the game are never discussed. That's when power reaches its most stable form, when those most affected turn against each other instead of looking upward. At an even deeper level, money doesn't just shape economies or politics, it shapes values. It defines success and failure. It determines who deserves admiration and who is labeled a loser. When everything is measured in money, anything that can't be priced gets pushed aside. People begin trading time for income, health for stability, freedom for security, and they call it maturity. But very few can point to the moment they consciously agreed to these rules. They only realize they've been inside the system for a long time. The system doesn't need to be perfect. It only needs to function well enough not to collapse immediately. Gaps, injustices, and inequality are treated as acceptable costs. As long as the whole keeps running, individual losses are dismissed as personal problems. And when someone tries to step outside the framework, they're quickly pulled back in, not through violence, but through reality. No access to capital, no access to markets, no access to liquidity. The modern world is built around money, and anyone who refuses its rules becomes isolated. Here's the critical realization. Monetary power doesn't require your belief. It only requires your participation. You can disagree, you can criticize, but as long as you need money to live, you remain inside the system. The only difference is awareness. Those who don't understand react. Those who understand prepare. And those who design the system are always ahead of both. When you study history, you'll notice empires don't fall because they lack resources. They fall because they lose control of money. When currency collapses, when debt becomes unmanageable, when trust erodes, military strength and culture can't save them. Every time an old order weakens, a new one emerges. But one thing remains constant. Monetary power always finds a way to stay at the center. It may change form, change language, change tools, but its essence remains the same. At this point, the goal isn't to decide who's right or wrong. The goal is to see the structure. Once you see the structure, crises no longer surprise you. Volatility no longer causes panic. You understand that what's happening isn't random, it's consequential. And once you understand that, new questions arise. Not the questions the system encourages, but the ones that touch the foundation. Who has the right to create money? Who benefits from its creation? And what the true cost of stability really is. The answers don't fit inside a single video. But asking the questions already moves you beyond the role of a pawn. You may still be on the board, but now you can see the hand of the player. And that's where this chapter ends. Before talking about war, global crises, or major collisions between monetary systems, the foundation has to be understood, because every conflict above begins with structures below. Money isn't just a medium of exchange, it's an architecture of power. And once you see that architecture, the world is never simple again.
Follow, subscribe, and share the channel to gain new knowledge and grow every day.